Welcome, viewers, to the Spondylitis Association of America and UCB collaboration for Healthy Living with AxSpA. I'm Dr. Hillary Norton. I'm a practicing rheumatologist, and I focus on the treatment and research of axial spondyloarthritis. I am passionate about raising awareness for these disease states, and I am thrilled to be here today with these two. So we have Dana Marton. She is a patient advocate. She is actually an educational support group leader for an SAA support group. And she herself has been diagnosed with both ankylosing spondylitis as well as psoriatic arthritis with spinal involvement. So welcome, Dana.
So I've lived with spondylitis, ankylosing spondylitis and psoriatic arthritis for years. I was diagnosed in 2005 with psoriatic arthritis and in 2006 with ankylosing spondylitis. And it was a long journey for me because when I was 19, I started having problems with my back and with my neck. And it just took a long time. My doctors couldn't find out what was wrong with me. So I just had to push myself and be my own advocate. It's a long journey for a lot of people. Sometimes it takes 7 to 10 years to get diagnosed, and that's not uncommon. I'm on the right medication. I'm on an anti-inflammatory diet, and I see the right doctors. So everything's working well for me.
And we have Chef Kevin Gillespie, who brings us his culinary expertise today. So we are thrilled to have Kevin here. He owns two Atlanta area, soon to be two Atlanta area restaurants, award-winning gun show, and soon to open Nader.
That's right. Nailed it.
Did I get it right?
Got it.
He was a fan favorite on season 6 of Top Chef. Everybody's still talking about that, and he has authored 2 cookbooks. So very excited to have you both here today.
Thank you.
And we're going to get cooking in just a minute, or Kevin is, but let's just talk about axial spondyloarthritis for just a minute. So we are doing all of this because of these inflammatory rheumatic diseases. And these are diseases that primarily affect the spine as well as the peripheral joints. This includes ankylosing spondylitis, psoriatic arthritis, non-radiographic axial spondyloarthritis, and some others in this same group of diseases. But these are diseases that really affect the spine, the peripheral joints, sometimes the skin. And so we're going to talk about the connection with inflammation today.
Excellent. Well, I think I can help you guys a little bit. So obviously I am no expert in this, but what I am an expert in is food that is prepared using natural ingredients and not a lot of the stuff that comes from the middle aisles of the grocery store. This is shopping on the outside, if you will. And that really, to me, is the key, the first step along the way to making something that is going to be much more nutritionally sound. And in this case, also something that's very anti-inflammatory. So I want to call your attention first to a few of the ingredients. By the way, the dish that we're preparing is called salmon in papillote. So salmon, and then the in papillote is really more of a technique than a recipe. And I'll explain that as we go along. But the ingredients we're going to use today starts off obviously with this, which is wild king salmon from Alaska. I think wild salmon is really important. It's obviously much better for the environment, but also it has a much more appropriate level of omega-3 fatty acids. Very, very nutritious.
Looks beautiful.
It is. It's a beautiful piece of fish. And we're going to be able to make this into a couple portions here. We also have some lacinato kale or Tuscan kale, depending on what you want to call it. Again, green leafy vegetables, always great. And this is one of my favorites because when you cook it, it still retains some of its texture, which for me, one of the biggest challenges with healthy eating is the monotony of it. And so if you can find a way to make it a little bit more fun, I think that's an easy call on that. We have some carrots, obviously high in beta carotene, really great. Also a natural sort of sweetener for this, so we have a more balanced flavor profile.
I love the colors here.
Exactly.
This,
it is a very colorful dish.
It's beautiful.
Exactly. We have a little bit of shallot and garlic. The alliums are obviously going to help us as well. Aside from tasting delicious, they have some natural anti-inflammatory properties. Lots of fresh herbs. This is the key. Anytime you're cooking healthy food, these aren't the calorie count on this, or, what they do for you nutritionally is not so much as what they're going to do for us from a flavor perspective. So dill, tarragon, and parsley. And then over here, some whole grains. In this case, it's farro, which is a wheat berry. One of my absolute favorites. I have pre-cooked this just a little bit because they take a little bit of time to cook.
Sure.
You could use rice for this. You could use amaranth or quinoa. All of those would be great. I just happen to like farro, and I like how it has sort of a chewy texture.
I love the texture. I put it in soup sometimes.
Exactly.
It's great.
I love it. To me, it makes me think of the cereal from my childhood, Honey Smacks. Like it has like kind of like texture to it.
It does.
And then some extra virgin olive oil, which is an all-star heat. Exactly. I mean, the more of that, the better. And then some fresh lemons that we use the zest and the juice. So that's it. Now, with this recipe, all of these things are interchangeable. The empapillote is a method of cooking something in a little, in this case, a parchment paper parcel. That's what it means. Papillote means balloon, basically, in French. And so you could swap salmon for halibut or Arctic char or trout. You could swap the kale for Swiss chard. My point is that I want folks to see this as a really adaptable dish that is going to be super accomplishable for you at home because you don't have to be married to each individual ingredient. If you know, for example, that, maybe your stomach doesn't love wheat berries or farro, swap it for rice. It's still going to be an outstanding dish.
Sure.
So why don't we get working on it?
Let's do that.
Okay, awesome. So first thing I'm going to do is just trim this piece of salmon up into 2 pieces. Only because this is pretty big. And I'm going for maybe about a 5.5 to 6 ounce piece of fish per person. Now, this still has the skin on it, which I personally prefer. It's not going to get crispy or anything, and you're going to kind of peel it away. Most people won't eat it. But what I find is that when we cook this with the skin on, it retains a lot more moisture. And you end up with something that's just a lot juicier piece of fish than if you take it off.
Sure.
And so there's really no reason to take it off. So we're going to leave it on there. And I'll set that aside for just a moment. Now, for our veggies, this is pretty simple. We're going to slice these down into small pieces because everything is going to cook at the same time. It's going to cook in this parchment paper. And so we need to make sure that everything is pretty small. Now, I could sit here and do this by hand as a professional, but I wouldn't recommend it for most folks at home. That's a good way to cut your fingers off.
Right.
So I love this thing. It's called a mandolin, a Japanese mandolin, and it's just a way of slicing things really thin without having to use your knife.
Oh, look at that. That's
now,
beautiful.
For 2 portions, which is what we have right here, we only really need about 1 full carrot. So we have some extra here we can set aside. Now, I do want to slice this up with my knife afterwards into little matchsticks, or a julienne, as it would be called. And again, I want them small. It's not so much important that you use the exact same shape as I have. You can cut it into little tiny coins. What you want, though, is for everything to be small so that it cooks quickly, because this is only going to be in your oven for about 12 minutes. And actually, in reality, it'll be in the oven for about 9, and then it will sit for about 3 or 4 minutes. So it cooks really, really fast.
Easy weeknight dinner, right?
Absolutely. And if you really want to cheat, and I tell people this all the time, I don't have a problem with you going to the store and buying the angel hair, cabbage, and broccoli mix and doing it with that. That's fine if that's what...
Get those vegetables in.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for folks, too, who are trying to manage their diet, that it not be daunting. It's super, super easy. And in this case, there's also very little cleanup because we're going to cook it and serve it from the same little parchment bag. Exactly. Everybody loves that part. So I'm just going to toss these in my bowl with my farro. Next up will be our shallot. And with this, I don't really need to slice it on the mandolin. I can just kind of slice it by hand. But I do want to slice it as thin as possible. So if you can't get it quite as thin by hand, you can absolutely continue to use the mandolin. It's not important that you use the same shape as me. Just get it nice and small. And if that means mincing this up and just kind of hacking it all to bits, that's fine too. It's going to eat the same way. So I wouldn't sweat it too much. Don't get too stressed out about that part of the recipe by any means. And the volume of each of these ingredients, by the way, is very much to taste. Shallots are stronger than your traditional onion, and so I will use a lot less of it than if I was, say, using a red onion here. So I'm gonna keep that in mind. It's a very, very strong vegetable, so I'll set that aside. Now, if I was going to use leeks or something, which is a wonderful one to use, I might need 2 or 3 times as much of that because they're just not quite as powerful.
Mild.
Yeah, exactly.
Good to know.
Yeah, it might have been more mild. Feel free to modify to your personal taste. Now, with the garlic, this is a very modest amount. We won't even use a full clove. If we do, we will definitely overwhelm the flavor of the fish. So about 1/2 of a clove of garlic. And then with the greens, I personally don't put the stalks in, so I'll peel them off of the stalk. Now, it doesn't mean that I throw the stalks away. I think the stalks are great. I actually really like them, but I tend to treat it as two separate vegetables.
Oh, interesting.
I like the leafy greens for something like this, and then I save the stalks and stir fry them more like you would broccoli or something like that, so that they keep their crunch, which I think is really nice. I don't like them being cooked at the same time, though, because the cooking time is very different. The stalk will take, several minutes, and it's still pretty woody. This will cook very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So for this, I'll just kind of bunch it up and do what's basically a chiffonade, so like a ribbon cut on it. And again, you can do this however you wish. You can chop it up if you need to. You could put a lot of this in your food processor even. But for me, it's not worth dirtying up another piece of kitchen equipment. So
Right. We like that quick cleanup.
exactly. And again, all of this, minus the actual assembly, can be done well ahead of time. There's no reason that this can't be mixed together and put in your fridge and satisfied.
Right. That meal prep. Yeah.
Exactly. So things that are going to go in here to season this. So obviously we're going to have a little bit of salt. Now, for me, a little bit is probably more than most people. So keep in mind that if you have some salt restrictions, you can back off this amount. I'm going to season it to my personal taste. I'm also going to use a little bit of lemon zest in this. So not the juice of it, not yet. We'll use the lemon juice later on. But now we're going to start by zesting the lemon into it. And a lot of the flavor that we associate with lemon is the oil from the rind. And so this will bring a lot of lemon flavor, but it won't actually introduce any acidity to this, which is important because it won't brown our vegetables. So I won't make them turn army green, which is nice.
Great tip.
Exactly. Hold on to that because we are going to use that when we get a little bit further down the road. And then we're going to add our herbs. Now, I have chosen this trio that tends to be labeled as fiend herbs, meaning, soft herbs. And in this case, that's tarragon, it's dill, it's parsley. Sometimes that will include chives. I think of these as traditional fish herbs. For me, it is a very French technique, but this is a very French flavor combination because these are all very soft and very aromatic. I wouldn't do this dish with something like thyme or rosemary because it's just too strong for a piece of fish. It'll cover up all of the flavor of the fish itself. Now, that said, if you hate dill, for example, and I know plenty of people who do, and you wanted to do this with basil, lovely. If you want to give this more of a Spanish or a Mexican flavor and put cilantro in here and some other ingredients, that'd be lovely too. Like, the technique can be used for a number of different flavor profiles. You don't feel like you have to be married to one over the other. So this is all we need to do for this other than to give it just a quick stir up to kind of mix things together. So think of this as an undressed salad almost.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to go in the bottom of this. This will become the base for our dish. Here's the most complicated part. And it's still not complicated, but it's the most complicated part. So this is the in papillote part of this journey. Parchment paper. Now, I want to call this out because it's not butcher paper and it's not wax paper, and a lot of folks can get those mixed up. Parchment paper, meaning it is safe to cook with. Right. If you did this in wax paper, we would have a catastrophe on our hands. So let's not do that.
Don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. So parchment paper. Now, in this case, these are already pre-cut sheets, which are just really easy for folks, and they'll fit a portion about this size. If you want to do a bigger piece, you would be better served to get the long roll and then cut it yourself.
Right.
So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to kind of set my knife on the side so it holds it in place while I work here. I'm going to take a spoonful, a pretty big spoonful of our mixture and just kind of put it right in the middle. That looks pretty good to me. And when I'm doing this, I'm kind of just making sure, okay, I got some of everything in there. That looks about right. I'm going to add another little pinch of salt, and I will add a little bit of olive oil now on top of the veggies and the grains. And then I will set my foiled salmon right on top of it with the skin side sitting on the veggies. And then again, I'll sprinkle some salt over the top of this. And I will sprinkle a little bit of olive oil on it. Now, we'll come back with more of this later on.
It looks delicious already.
It's so good. And it's fun. It looks cool. And it's really, really easy to deal with. Now is the fun part, which is the folding it. So in papillote, the balloon, if you will, is this little package. And so you pick up the two sides and meet them together. I am not an expert present wrapper by any stretch of the imagination. I like to think that if you're good at wrapping Christmas presents, though, you'd be very good at this. So what I like to do is give it one turn over and kind of pinch it closed, and then give it a second and a third until I get down to basically touching the top of the piece of fish. So
Okay.
kind of a roll, fold sort of scenario. It doesn't have to be perfect by any means. And then take your sides, and you can, if you want, you can be very meticulous with this. You can keep folding and keep folding. What I find is that it doesn't actually need that, and you can kind of just fold it underneath itself like this.
It can be loose.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
It needs to be fairly tight, but you don't actually have to sit here and make these perfect folds for the same effect to take place. It's not quite that specific by any. What you do want to do, though, is set it so that the seams are on the bottom here, and the piece of fish is on the top.
So it doesn't unwrap.
Exactly. So it doesn't unwrap. And also because this will be subjected to the most heat, the vegetables will get less of that inherently because they're in contact with the skin and they have more paper around it. So the thing that needs to cook more, the raw fish, will be able to cook more than the vegetables, which need very, very little cooking to actually be done. The faro is already cooked.
Right.
I'm going to pop this in the oven, 375 degrees.
Okay.
And I'm going to go for 9 minutes and then let it sit for another 4 minutes. Now, this is a matter of personal preference. I don't want my salmon well done. Some people do.
Right.
If you want it more, I would take it to about 12 or 13 minutes in the oven and then let it sit for 3 or 4. And if you like your salmon very, very rare, you could pull this as early as 7 minutes.
Wow.
So
And
it really is
letting it sit because it continues to cook.
Exactly. It will continue to steam. And that is really the method for cooking here is really steaming more than it is baking. So it makes it incredibly healthy. So not only is this great from an anti-inflammatory standpoint, this is just a very healthy dish regardless of what your diet.
Right.
So
right.
let's pop it in the oven.
Okay.
And while it bakes, we can chat a little bit more.
Yes. Looks delicious. Now, Dana, I know you eat an anti-inflammatory diet already, right? So you have some experience with this type of food.
Yes. So I, for a while, I did where I kept a journal and I basically like a diary of food that I did well with, food that I didn't do well with, food that would cause me to flare, I would ease off on, or have continued to not eat it anymore at all. And what works really well for me is a Mediterranean diet. So you had mentioned that we could change some of the herbs and make it a Mediterranean meal.
Right.
So I probably would go more with the Mediterranean style.
Right.
And this is very like a traditional Mediterranean meal, really. It is, and so that's what I eat is mostly Mediterranean with the olive oil and the greens and that. So this would really work well with my diet.
And as you know, there are so many benefits for spondyloarthritis with an anti-inflammatory diet. As you already mentioned, some of them, people flare when they eat the wrong foods, but an anti-inflammatory diet can help with mobility, with decreasing inflammation, with decreasing pain, with maintaining a good weight, a healthy weight, right? I mean, we talked about that with this meal in particular. And also the comorbidities that go with SPA. So we know that patients with inflammatory disease are at increased risk for cardiovascular disease and some other issues. This is a very good way of eating to address that. We're really using food as medicine here. And this is such a great way to incorporate the whole healthy lifestyle, right? There are many things that we can do for treatment, including medications and exercise, physical therapy, psychological and social support. All of these things are important, but this is something that we do every single day, multiple times a day. So it just makes sense that we are eating vibrant, healthy food that can help support us. Right, in our health journey, right? I love it when, it's talked about to eat the rainbow, right? Because we can eat more food for one thing, but it is helpful when we're eating all of these different colorful things from around the outside of the store. And we can experiment with foods in the produce section too. I know that I've learned about so many different types of produce. I worked on a farm many years ago, and that sort of spurred this whole thing, but it's exciting to experiment with different produce and learn how to cook it.
So speaking of cooking, I think we're ready to come out of the oven. So
excellent.
All right, let me grab a towel here or pot holder, whatever you prefer.
I'm excited to see this.
Me too.
It's going to be good. So one of the ways to test its doneness, because we don't want to unwrap it just yet, is just to kind of give it a little touch here. And so it should be firm. It should spring back to you. If you push on it and it leaves kind of a dent, it's still quite raw. And so by pushing on this and seeing it spring back to me, I know that the fish is done. So we're just going to let that sit for a few minutes. If we open it up right now, we're going to lose some of the steam that's going to finish cooking this, but also we might burn ourselves. So let's keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Finish this dish. You have a number of different options. I like to squeeze a little bit of fresh lemon juice on top of the fish itself. And so I'm just going to cut a little small piece for myself here. I also like some extra olive oil on it, maybe a little bit more salt, and then perhaps a little bit more herbs. So I might pick just a little bit more dill here and just do, again, a very small couple passes through just to make it a little bit more manageable. And then when we take this, pull opposite of the way we fold it. So pull it open.
Beautiful. Look at that.
And then we can kind of just leave that right there. And so what I'll do is I'll squeeze a little lemon juice over the top of the fish, which will add some nice acidity to it. I'll be a little bit more aggressive with my olive oil this time because this is now our sauce. It's a flavoring for this. And so I'll go with a really solid tablespoon or so of olive oil, a little bit more salt, and then just some of our fresh herbs over the top of it.
Look at that.
And that's it. That's our
That
wild
looks
salmon and papillote.
incredible, beautiful, and tasty, and healthy, and good for us.
Exactly. Well, hopefully tasty. I know it checks all those other boxes. So we got to make sure that it actually
I
tastes.
have no doubt.
Do you guys want to try it?
Absolutely.
Okay. You guys dig in and feel free to kind of go straight down, mix it up, and remember that it's not going to be pretty anymore. So don't feel like you got to be dead.
It's so beautiful right now. Well, this looks incredible. Thank you, Kevin. This is pretty exciting. Oh my goodness, you guys. That's amazing.
Yeah, I really like this dish because I think that it is a great way to get just a lot of flavor, but also just to stay very, very healthy and to be really mindful about what you're eating.
And the flavor is incredible. You know, I think that I've heard that some people are concerned that wild salmon has a stronger flavor, but this is very mild and the flavor is incredible with the herbs and the citrus, the olive oil. Well, I think that we are all going to be cooking with this method and using parchment paper because this is incredible.
And plus, when you're done, this goes away and really there's not very little cleanup behind. Exactly.
Very, very simple, easy prep and cleanup.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the kind of food that just really makes us feel good. Right. So good for our joints, good for our cardiovascular health. Yeah, this is incredible.
Well, I'm glad you guys enjoy it. I think this is a really fun recipe, and I think it's also something that's very doable for folks at home, including people with a busy schedule. So, by the way, if anyone wants these recipes, they can go to the SAA's website, spondylitis.org, and you can find this there. You can also come visit me at one of my restaurants, whether that be Gun Show or Nadir. And obviously, if you're in the Atlanta area, I would love to host you anytime you come down.
I think I will be doing that.
Please do.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
And if you want to find out about diet and nutrition, or if you have any other questions about spondylitis, go to spondylitis.org.
And remember, everybody's body is different. So what works for one person may not work for the next. So make sure to work with your healthcare providers and even a certified nutritionist, if you can, to figure out what the best plan is that works for you. And I just want to thank you guys for being here. Thank you so much, Chef Kevin, for sharing your culinary expertise. This was incredible. I look forward to making this recipe, and I'm sure that all of you look forward to doing that as well. And Dana, thank you for sharing your personal experience and for all you do as a patient advocate. And I want to thank UCB for sponsoring this video. And of course, I want to thank the viewers for being here with us tonight. And thank you, Spondylitis Association of America, for doing this educational video.